Go away from me. I don't need anybody. You are all fake. Nobody care about me. I know you two will leave. No one can tolerate me. Nobody truly cares about me. You all want money.
Welcome to Heritage Story, your #1 folktales channel for amazing stories.
The glass shattered against the wall, missing Zainab's head by inches. She froze in the doorway of the massive bedroom, her heart hammering against her ribs as expensive whiskey dripped down the cream-colored wallpaper. The man in the wheelchair sat by the window, his face twisted with rage, his powerful arm still positioned from the throw. "Get out!" Mr. Kohler's voice thundered through the mansion, raw and bitter. "I don't need another fake smile pretending to care." Zainab's hands trembled as she gripped the breakfast tray, but she didn't move. She had traveled 12 hours from her village to take care of this billionaire, and on her first morning, he was already trying to break her. The other servants had warned her during the night. Mr. Kohler went through caregivers like tissue paper. Some lasted a day, others fled within hours. But Zainab needed this job desperately. Her mother's medical bills were piling up back home, and this position paid more in a month than she could earn in a year selling vegetables at the village market. "Sir, your breakfast is getting cold," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. His dark eyes snapped to her face, surprise flickering across his features before the anger returned. Nobody ever stayed after the first glass. If you're watching this story unfold, subscribe now because what happens next will change everything you think you know about love and betrayal. Mr. Kohler's mansion stood like a fortress in the heart of Lagos, all glass and steel and old money. Zainab had arrived the previous evening, her worn bag clutched in her hands as she stared up at the building that seemed to touch the clouds. The housekeeper, Mrs. Adeyemi, had given her a small room in the servants' quarters and a simple warning. "Don't take anything he says personally. The accident destroyed more than his legs." Now, standing in his bedroom with broken glass scattered across the marble floor, Zainab understood what that meant. This man wasn't just physically broken. His soul was shattered too. Mr. Kohler was perhaps 40 years old, with a strong jawline and the kind of presence that must have commanded boardrooms before the wheelchair. His expensive silk pajamas hung loosely on his frame, suggesting he'd lost weight since the accident. The room itself told a story of abandoned luxury, medical equipment mixed with designer furniture, prescription bottles on antique tables, and dust gathering on awards and photographs that nobody bothered to display properly anymore. "Did you not hear me?" Mr. Kohler demanded, wheeling his chair closer to her. "I said get out. Take your pity and your village innocence and leave before I make you regret coming here." Zainab set the tray down on the nearest table, her movements careful and deliberate. She had dealt with difficult people before. Her late father had been a stubborn man, refusing medicine even as sickness consumed him. She recognized pain when she saw it, and the man before her was drowning in it. "I'm not here to pity you, sir," Zainab replied, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. "I'm here because I need this job. My mother is sick, and I have 3 younger siblings to feed. So you can throw all the glasses you want, but I'm not leaving." The shock on his face was almost comical. His mouth opened, then closed. For a moment, the rage faltered, replaced by something else, confusion, perhaps, or a flicker of respect. Then his expression hardened again, but this time without the same fire. "You have no idea what you're signing up for," he said, his voice dropping to something dangerously quiet. "I'm not some charity case for a poor village maid to fix. I don't need saving." Zainab picked up the broom from the corner and began sweeping up the broken glass. "Good," she said simply, "because I'm not here to save you. I'm here to do my job, keep you fed, keep you clean, and keep you alive. What you do with your life beyond that is your own business." She could feel his eyes boring into her back as she worked, but she didn't turn around. Her grandmother had taught her that sometimes strength meant not reacting, not engaging in someone else's battle. Let them rage against the storm. Be the eye of calm in the center. When she finished cleaning and turned to leave with a tray of untouched food, his voice stopped her at the door. "What's your name?" he asked, and the question sounded like it cost him something to ask. "Zainab, sir." "Well, "Zainab from the village," he said, and there was something almost like dark humor in his tone. "Welcome to hell." The rest of that first day passed in tense silence. Zainab learned the mansion's rhythm from Mrs. Adiemi, Mr. Kohler's medicine schedule, his physical therapy routine that he refused to do, the business calls he still took from his bedroom, barking orders at executives who trembled on the other end of the line. She also learned about the relatives. His younger brother, Tunde, visited every Tuesday, always asking about the will with concern that sounded rehearsed. His cousin, Ngozi, came on Fridays, her designer heels clicking through the holes as she complained about how the accident had affected the family's social standing. Even his former business partner, Chief Okafor, stopped by monthly, his eyes calculating as he suggested Mr. Kohler sell his shares before the stress kills you. Nobody visited just to visit. Nobody came to sit with him, to talk about anything beyond money and business and the empire that was slowly crumbling without his direct control. Zainab served dinner that evening, pepper soup and pounded yam that the cook had prepared. She set it on the table beside his wheelchair in the study, where he sat staring at financial reports with fierce concentration. "I'm not hungry," he said without looking up. "You haven't eaten all day, sir." "I said I'm not hungry." Zainab didn't move. She stood there, patient and immovable as a tree, until he finally looked up with irritation. "What?" he snapped. "Are you going to force-feed me like a child?" "If I have to," she replied calmly. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but almost. Then it was gone, buried under his scowl again. He ate 3 bites before pushing the bowl away, but it was 3 bites more than he'd eaten at breakfast. Zainab counted it as a small victory. That night, after ensuring Mr. Kohler was settled in his bedroom, Zainab retreated to her small room in the servants' quarters. She knelt beside her bed and prayed. For her mother's health, for her siblings' safety, for strength to endure this job. Her prayers were quiet but fervent, whispered in the darkness like secrets told to God alone. What she didn't know was that Mr. Kohler's bedroom was directly above Hayes, and in the silence of the mansion, sound traveled through the old ventilation system. He lay in his bed, unable to sleep as usual. When he heard it, the soft murmur of her voice, the gentle rhythm of prayer, something twisted in his chest, an emotion he couldn't name. When was the last time someone had prayed in this house? When was the last time he'd heard innocence like that, unmarred by greed or gender? He wheeled himself to the window and stared out at the Lagos skyline, the city lights blinking like stars fallen to earth. 3 months ago, he had been untouchable, a billionaire with the world at his feet. Then came the accident, the car crash that the police ruled as brake failure, but that he suspected was something far more sinister. He'd survived, but at a cost. His legs were paralyzed, and worse, his trust in everyone around him was shattered. Someone had tried to kill him. He was sure of it, and that someone was still out there, waiting for another opportunity to finish what they'd started. The thought should have filled him with the usual rage, but tonight, listening to the village maid pray in the room below, he felt something different, something he hadn't felt in 3 long months. Hope, and that terrified him more than any assassination attempt ever could, because hope meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant weakness, and weakness meant death. But as Zainab's prayers faded into silence, Mr. Kohler made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He would let her stay, at least for now, at least until he figured out what game she was really playing. Because in his world, nobody was innocent, not even a poor maid from the village. If you want to know whether Zainab can truly break through Mr. Kohler's walls of bitterness, hit that subscribe button now. Next chapter will reveal secrets that will shake everything. Drop a like if you're already hooked, and comment below whether you think Zainab should stay or run while she still can. 2 weeks passed like a careful dance between predator and prey, though neither was sure who played which role. Zainab settled into the mansion's rhythms with quiet efficiency, learning to read Mr. Kohler's moods the way farmers read the sky before rain. She knew when to speak and when silence served better than words. She understood that his morning rage stemmed from nightmares he refused to discuss, and his evening bitterness came from business calls that reminded him of the empire slipping through his fingers. The other servants watched her with a mixture of admiration and concern. You're either very brave or very foolish, Mrs. Adeyemi told her one afternoon while they folded laundry in the service room. He hasn't thrown anything at you in 3 days. That's a record. Zainab smiled softly, her hands working methodically through the expensive linens. He's not as terrible as he pretends to be. Mrs. Adeyemi's expression turned serious. Be careful, child. This house has secrets that can swallow people whole. The accident that put him in that wheelchair wasn't just bad luck. Before Zainab could ask what she meant, footsteps echoed in the hallway. They both fell silent as Tunde, Mr. Kohler's younger brother, walked past. He was handsome in a polished way. His designer suit fitted perfectly, his smile as bright and empty as a politician's promise. Stay tuned, because what Zainab discovers next will make your heart race. Don't go anywhere. Tunde's visits always left a strange tension in the air. Zainab noticed how Mr. Kohler's jaw tightened whenever his brother entered the room, how his hands gripped the wheelchair arms until his knuckles paled. This particular Tuesday, Tunde arrived with his usual flowers and false concern, settling into the leather chair across from Mr. Kohler's desk in the study. Zainab served them tea, her presence so quiet they seemed to forget she was there. "Brother, you're looking well," Tunde began, his voice smooth as expensive whiskey. "The new maid is taking good care of you, I see." Mr. Kohler's response was clipped. "What do you want, Tunde?" Can't a brother visit without wanting something? Tunde laughed, but it rang hollow in the large room. "Though since you mention it, the board is getting nervous. Your absence from meetings is causing instability. Perhaps it's time to consider stepping down as CEO. Just temporarily, of course, until you recover." The silence that followed was suffocating. Zainab kept her eyes down, pouring tea with steady hands, but she felt the rage building in Mr. Kohler like storm clouds gathering. "Recover?" Mr. Kohler's voice was dangerously soft. "You mean until I can walk again? We both know that's not happening. The doctors were very clear." "I didn't mean, you meant exactly that." Mr. Kohler cut him off. "You want me to hand over the company I built from nothing. The company our father left to me, not you." Tunde's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "It's for the good of the family business. Brother, nothing personal." Everything about it was personal, and they both knew it. Zainab watched as Tunde left 20 minutes later, his goodbye cheerful and his eyes calculating. The moment the door closed, Mr. Kohler swept his arm across the desk, sending papers and files flying across the study. His breathing was ragged, his chest heaving with fury and something else. Fear, perhaps, or the bitter taste of helplessness. "Sir," Zainab said softly, stepping forward. "Don't." His voice cracked like a whip. "Don't tell me to calm down. Don't tell me it will be fine. You don't understand anything." "Then help me understand," she replied, kneeling to pick up the scattered papers. "Talk to me." "Why should I?" He wheeled his chair around to face her, his expression twisted with anguish. "You're just a hired help. Why would I burden you with my problems?" Zainab met his gaze steadily, her dark eyes reflecting a wisdom that seemed too old for her young face. "Because everyone else in this house wants something from you. I'm the only one who doesn't." The words hung in the air between them, honest and raw. Something in Mr. Kohler's expression shifted, the armor cracking just slightly. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Instead, he did something that surprised them both. He laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound, but it was real. "You're right," he finally said. "God help me, you're right." That night marked a shift between them. As Zainab prepared his evening medicine, Mr. Kohler began to talk. Not about business or anger, but about before. About building his company from a single truck to a transportation empire. About his father's death and the weight of expectations. About the loneliness of success. The words came slowly at first, like water from a rusty tap, but once they started, they flowed. Zainab listened without judgment, her hands busy with small tasks while her heart absorbed his pain. She didn't offer empty platitudes or false hope. She simply listened, and somehow that was enough. Over the following days, the mansion began to feel different. Mr. Kohler still had his dark moods, still raged against the unfairness of his condition, but the edges of his bitterness began to dull. He started eating full meals instead of picking at his food. He allowed Zainab to help him with his physical therapy exercises, though he grumbled and complained through every movement. He even laughed occasionally at her stories from a village, tales of stubborn goats and gossiping market women that seemed impossibly far from his world of billionaire deals and corporate warfare. But the mansion's other occupants noticed the change too. Ngozi, the cousin who visited on Fridays, watched Zainab with narrowed eyes during her next visit. "Who is this girl?" she asked Mrs. Adeyemi in the hallway, her voice sharp with suspicion. "Just a maid from the village," the housekeeper replied carefully. "She takes care of Mr. Kohler." "She's taking too good care of him," Ngozi muttered. "He's smiling. He never smiles anymore." That observation, spoken with such venom, revealed more about Ngozi's true intentions than any confession could. She didn't want Mr. Kohler to recover. None of them did. A broken, bitter man was easier to control, easier to manipulate, easier to eventually replace. But a healing man? That was dangerous. The danger became real on a Thursday evening, exactly 3 weeks after Zainab's arrival. She was preparing Mr. Kohler's nightly medications in his bedroom when she noticed something odd. The pills in the bottle looked slightly different from usual. Same color, same shape, but with a faint marking she didn't recognize. Her grandmother had taught her about medicines and herbs, knowledge passed down through generations of village healers. Something about these pills felt wrong. Her instinct screamed warning. "Sir," she said slowly, holding up the bottle, "when did you last refill this prescription?" Mr. Kohler glanced up from the business report he was reading. "I don't know. The pharmacy delivers them." "Why?" "These pills look different." She turned the bottle in her hands, studying the label. The pharmacy name was correct, but the batch number seemed wrong. "They are probably just from a different manufacturer," Mr. Kohler said dismissively. "Give them here." But Zainab didn't move. Instead, she did something that would either save his life or cost her everything. She walked to his private bathroom, dropped one of the pills into a glass of water, and waited. Within seconds, the pill began to dissolve, but instead of the clear solution his regular medication produced, this one turned the water a faint, murky gray. "Sir," she said, her voice trembling now, "I think someone is trying to poison you." The words fell like bombs into the quiet room. Mr. Kohler stared at her, then at the glass, then back at her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his face went pale, and his hands gripped the wheelchair arm so tightly she heard the leather creak. "Get out," he whispered. But this time, it wasn't anger in his voice. It was terror, because if Zainab was right, it meant his suspicions were true. Someone in his inner circle, someone with access to his medications, someone he trusted, was trying to kill him, and they had been slowly poisoning him for God knows how long. Who's behind the poisoning? Is it Tunde, Ngozi, or someone even closer? Smash that like button if this twist shocked you, and subscribe because next chapter reveals a villain's face. Comment below who you think is trying to kill Mr. Kohler. Your theory might be right. The laboratory results came back 3 days later, and they confirmed Zainab's worst fears. The pills contained traces of a slow-acting poison, something that wouldn't kill immediately but would gradually weaken the body, mimicking the natural deterioration of someone confined to a wheelchair. Brilliant, really. Untraceable unless someone knew exactly what to look for. Mr. Kohler sat in his study, the lab report trembling in his hands, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. 6 months, he said, his voice hollow. The toxicologist says I've been taking these for at least 6 months, since right after the accident. Zainab stood nearby, her heart aching for him. The accident had been an attempt on his life. The poisoning was a backup plan. Someone wanted him dead with a patience that was truly terrifying. "We need to call the police," she said firmly. "No." His response was immediate and sharp. "No police. Not yet. But, sir, whoever did this has access to my private pharmacy deliveries. Zainab. They know my routines, my medications, my vulnerabilities. That means it's someone close. Someone in this house. He looked up at her, his dark eyes burning with determination she hadn't seen since before the accident. If I involve the police now, that person will disappear before we have proof. I need to know who it is first. I need to see their face. The hunter had been awakened, and God help whoever had made him pray. If you think you know who the traitor is, keep watching. This next revelation will blow your mind. Mr. Kohler's transformation was swift and calculating. He instructed Zainab to continue giving him the poison pills, but to dispose of them secretly while he pretended to take them. To the outside world, nothing had changed. He remained the bitter, declining billionaire trapped in his wheelchair, growing weaker by the day. But behind closed doors, he began to plan. He installed hidden cameras in his bedroom and study. He had his most trusted security chief, a former military man named Ibrahim who had served his father, quietly investigate his pharmacist delivery records. And he watched. He watched everyone who entered his mansion with new eyes, looking for the crack in their mask, the slip that would reveal guilt. Tunde came on Tuesday as usual, his smile bright, his concern performed like a rehearsed play. "Brother, you look pale," he said, settling into his usual chair. "Are you taking your medications?" "Every day," Mr. Kohler lied smoothly. "The doctors say it's just the stress of being confined. My body is giving up, apparently." Something flickered in Tunde's eyes, satisfaction, perhaps, or anticipation. "You should really consider my proposal about the company," he pressed. "Let me shoulder the burden while you focus on your health. It's what father would have wanted." The mention of their father was a calculated move, and they both knew it. Their father had built the original company but had always favored Mr. Kohler, the eldest son, the one with vision and ruthless ambition. Tunde had lived in that shadow his entire life, smiling through every slight, every time he was passed over. "I'll think about it," Mr. Kohler said, his voice weak and defeated. It was a performance worthy of an award. Tunde left an hour later, and the moment his car pulled away from the mansion, Mr. Kohler's weakness vanished like smoke. Ngozi visited that Friday, dripping in designer clothes and fake sympathy. She brought fruit baskets and magazines, chattering about family gossip while her eyes constantly assessed the room, cataloging everything valuable. "Cousin, you really must take better care of yourself," she cooed, perching on the edge of his desk. "The family is worried. We all depend on you, you know." "Depend on me or depend on my money?" Mr. Kohler asked with tired amusement. Ngozi's laugh was like breaking glass. "Don't be cynical, darling. We're family. Family looks out for each other." But Zainab, standing quietly by the door, noticed something that made her blood run cold. When Ngozi thought no one was watching, her gaze lingered on Mr. Kohler's medication bottles on the side table. Her expression wasn't one of concern. It was calculation, measuring, waiting. After Ngozi left, Zainab approached Mr. Kohler carefully. "Say, I saw it too," he interrupted, his jaw tight. She was checking to see if I was still taking the pills. They looked at each other, the weight of conspiracy pressing down on them. But was it Ngozi working alone, or was she part of something larger? The answer came that very night in the most unexpected way. Zainab was in the kitchen preparing Mr. Kohler's dinner, when she heard voices drifting from the garden. The mansion's windows were old, and sound traveled strangely through colonial architecture. She moved closer to the window, careful to stay hidden in the shadows. Outside, lit by the garden security lights, stood Tunde and Ngozi. Together, their body language was intimate, conspiratorial. They thought they were alone, hidden from the house by the large fountain. How much longer? Ngozi's voice carried on the night breeze, sharp with impatience. The pills should have finished him by now. Tunde's response made Zainab's breath catch in her throat. "Be patient. The poison is slow but certain. Another month, maybe 2, and his organs will fail. The doctors will call it complication from the accident. No one will question it. And you're sure about the will?" Ngozi pressed. Once is gone, you inherit everything? The company, the properties, all of it. Everything, Tunde confirmed, and there was dark satisfaction in his voice. Our dear brother made his will years ago, before he realized how alone he truly was. He never updated it after father died. By default, it all comes to me. Ngozi laughed, a sound like poison honey. Then we'll finally have what we deserve. What should have been ours from the beginning? They embraced then, and Zainab realized with dawning horror that this wasn't just about business or inheritance. Tunde and Ngozi were lovers. This conspiracy had been built on more than greed. It had been built on twisted love and shared resentment. She pulled back from the window, her heart racing, her mind spinning. She had to tell Mr. Kohler, had to warn him that the danger was even closer than they thought. But as she turned to leave the kitchen, she walked straight into Chief Okafor, Mr. Kohler's former business partner. He stood in the doorway, blocking her exit, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Going somewhere, my dear? He asked softly. The way he said it made her realize with sinking dread that he'd been standing there the entire time. He'd heard everything she'd heard. The question was he part of the conspiracy, or had she just found an unexpected ally? Chief Okafor studied Zainab with eyes that had built and destroyed empires. He was in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, the kind of man who wore authority like a tailored suit. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched toward as a wire. Then he stepped aside, gesturing for her to pass. You should tell him what you heard, Chief Okafor said quietly. Tell him everything. You're not going to stop me. Zainab whispered, confused. Why would I stop you from saving his life? The old man's expression was weary and sad. Kohler and I had our disagreements over business. Yes, I wanted him to expand into areas he thought were too risky. We argued. We parted ways. But I never wanted him dead. He paused, looking out the window at the garden where Tunde and Ngozi had disappeared into the shadows. Those two, however, have wanted him dead since the day their father's will was read. I've suspected for months but had no proof. Why didn't you warn him? Zainab demanded. Chief Okafor's smile was bitter. Would he have believed me? A former partner he pushed out of the business? He would have thought I was trying to manipulate him. But you're different. You have no agenda. He trusts you. The weight of that trust settled on Zainab's shoulders like a mantle. She nodded once and hurried from the kitchen, her feet quick and quiet on the marble floors. She found Mr. Kohler in his bedroom, reviewing security footage on his laptop. The moment she entered, he looked up and read the fear on her face. What happened? He demanded. And so she told him everything. About the garden conversation, about Tunde and Ngozi's affair, about their plan to inherit his empire once the poison finished its work. She watched as his face transformed from shock to rage to something colder and more dangerous, the look of a predator who had just found his prey. When she finished, Mr. Kohler was silent for a long time. Then he reached for his phone and made a call. Ibrahim, he said when his security chief answered. I need you to do something for me. It's time to set a trap. The trap is set, but will Mr. Kohler's plan work, or will it backfire? Hit subscribe now, because next chapter brings the ultimate confrontation. Like this video if you're Team Zainab, and drop a comment telling us what revenge Mr. Kohler should take on his betrayers. The family meeting was Mr. Kohler's idea, and it was brilliant in its simplicity. He sent formal invitations to Tunde, Ngozi, and a handful of other relatives, claiming he had important announcements about the company and his will. I'm dying. The message read, stark and brutal. Come say your goodbyes and hear my final wishes. They came like vultures to a carcass, circling and eager. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday evening in the mansion's grand dining room, a space that hadn't been used since before the accident. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across the long mahogany table. Mrs. Adeyemi and the staff had prepared an elaborate dinner, though no one expected much eating to happen. Zainab helped Mr. Kohler dress that evening, her hand steady as she buttoned his expensive shirt. He'd insisted on looking his best, a warrior preparing for battle. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly, meeting his eyes in the mirror. They'll deny everything. It's your word against theirs. Not for long, Mr. Kohler replied, his smile cold and sharp as a blade. I have something they don't know about. Something that will make denial impossible. He wouldn't tell her what, only that she should trust him. So she did, even as her stomach twisted with anxiety. This night would change everything, one way or another. Stay with us. What happens next will leave you speechless. They gathered at 7 o'clock, a collection of well-dressed predators pretending to be a grieving family. Tunde arrived first, his expression appropriately somber, though his eyes gleamed with barely concealed anticipation. Ngozi followed minutes later, dabbing at dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. The other relatives, cousins and distant family members who had never visited during the hard months, filled the remaining seats with murmured condolences that rang hollow in the large room. Mr. Kohler sat at the head of the table in his wheelchair, looking pale and weak. It was a performance he perfected over the past week. Zainab stood against the wall with the other servants, her face neutral, her heart hammering. Chief Okafor sat near the far end, his presence a surprise to everyone except Mr. Kohler. "Thank you all for coming," Mr. Kohler began, his voice thin and tired. "I know some of you haven't visited in months, so your concern now is particularly touching." The sarcasm was so subtle that most miss it entirely. Tunde leaned forward with false brotherly concern. "Kohler, you said in your message that you're dying. What did the doctors say? Is it your heart? Your lungs?" "My organs are failing," Mr. Kohler replied, the lies sliding smoothly from his lips. "Multiple systems shutting down. The doctors give me weeks, maybe days." A collective gasp went around the table, but if you looked closely, as Zainab did, you could see the flash of triumph in Tunde's eyes, the satisfied curve in Ngozi's mouth before she schooled it back to grief. "They thought they'd won. That's why I've called you here," Mr. Kohler continued, "to discuss my will and the future of my company. Tunde, as my only brother, I decided to make some changes." Tunde's breath caught. This was it, the moment he'd been poisoning his brother for. "I'm listening," he said carefully. "I'm leaving everything to you," Mr. Kohler announced. The room erupted. Distant relatives protested, arguing they deserved something, while Tunde's face transformed into a mask of shocked gratitude that would have been convincing if Zainab hadn't known the truth. "Brother, I don't know what to say," Tunde stammered, standing up from his seat. "This is too much. I'm honored, truly honored." "Don't be," Mr. Kohler said flatly, "because you're not getting a single naira." The change in his tone was so sudden, so complete, that the room fell silent. Mr. Kohler's weakness vanished like smoke. He sat straighter in his wheelchair, his eyes burning with cold fury. "Did you really think I didn't know?" he asked, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "Did you think I was so broken, so pathetic, that I wouldn't realize my own brother was poisoning me?" Tunde's face went white. "What are you talking about?" "Kohler, the stress is clearly—" "Shut up." The command cracked like a whip. Mr. Kohler reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small recording device. "Before you lie to my face again, you should know that I have everything. Every conversation. Every confession." He pressed play, and Tunde's voice filled the room, damning and clear. "The poison is slow but certain. Another month, maybe 2, and his organs will fail." The recording continued, playing the entire garden conversation between Tunde and Ngozi. Their plans, their affair, their greed laid bare for everyone to hear. Zainab watched as Tunde's face transformed from shock to rage to something like panic. Ngozi had gone pale as death, her handkerchief clutched so tightly in her hand that her knuckles were white. When the recording ended, the silence was suffocating. Then chaos erupted. The other relatives began shouting, some at Tunde and Ngozi, others demanding answers. Tunde stood frozen, his mind visibly racing for an escape, an explanation, anything. "You have no proof," he finally said, his voice desperate. "That recording could be edited, fabricated. You're paranoid and sick. Kohler, everyone knows you haven't been right since the accident." "Is that so?" Mr. Kohler's smile was terrifying. He gestured to Ibrahim, who stood near the door like a sentinel. The security chief stepped forward and placed a folder on the table. "Laboratory analysis of the pills you've been having delivered to my brother," Ibrahim said, his voice professionally detached. "They contain traces of thallium-based poison. We also have CCTV footage from the pharmacy showing you, Mr. Tunde, picking up and paying for these specific medications 3 times over the past 6 months. And financial records showing payment from your account to a Dr. Adelik, who was struck off the medical register 2 years ago for illegal prescription practices." Each piece of evidence was a nail in Tunde's coffin. His face crumbled, the mask finally falling away to reveal the desperate, hateful man beneath. "You don't understand," he said, and his voice was raw now, all pretense gone. "It should have been mine. All of it. Father always favored you, always chose you, even though I worked just as hard. I was invisible, a shadow, and for what? So you could sit in your ivory tower and look down on all of us." "So you tried to kill me," Mr. Kohler said, his voice deadly quiet. "You orchestrated a car accident, and when that didn't finish the job, you started poisoning me. Slowly, carefully, watching me die by inches." "Yes." Tunde's control finally snapped, the word exploding from him like a confession torn from his soul. "Yes, I did it. The brakes, the poison, all of it. And I'd do it again because you don't deserve what you have. You never did." The room seemed to hold its breath. Even Ngozi looked shocked by the raw admission, as if she hadn't quite believed until this moment how far Tunde had been willing to go. Mr. Kohler stared at his brother, and for a moment, something like grief flickered across his face. "You could have just asked," he said softly. "If you'd come to me years ago and told me you felt overlooked, if you'd worked with me instead of against me, I would have made you a true partner. But you chose this. You chose to become a murderer." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Tunde's head snapped toward the windows, realization dawning too late. "You called the police," he whispered, "before you even started this meeting." "Of course I did," Mr. Kohler replied. "I needed your confession on record. I needed witnesses. And now I have both." The police burst through the mansion doors moments later, led by a stern-faced inspector who'd been briefed by Chief Okafor earlier that day. Tunde tried to run, actually tried to bolt for the back entrance, but Ibrahim and 2 other security guards blocked his path. The arrest was swift and brutal. Tunde fought, screaming accusations and curses as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Ngozi sat frozen at the table, tears finally real as she realized her own fate was sealed. "You're a monster," Tunde shouted as the police dragged him toward the door. "You hear me, Kohler? You're a monster." Mr. Kohler watched his brother being taken away, his expression unreadable. "No, Tunde," he said quietly, though his brother was already too far to hear. "I'm just a man who refused to die." And as the police cars pulled away from the mansion, their lights painting the walls red and blue, Zainab realized she was crying. Not for Tunde, who deserved his fate, but for Mr. Kohler, who had just lost his last family member to betrayal and greed. Justice is served, but at what cost? The emotional aftermath in Chapter 5 will break your heart. Subscribe now to see how Zainab and Mr. Kohler pick up the pieces. Hit like if you think Tunde got what he deserved, and comment whether you believe Mr. Kohler can never trust again. The mansion felt like a tomb in the days following Tunde's arrest. Mr. Kohler retreated into himself, speaking only when necessary, his eyes hollow and distant. He stopped attending his physical therapy sessions. He barely ate. The fire that had burned so bright during the confrontation had gutted out, leaving only ash and grief. Zainab watched him with growing concern. This man who had survived poison and betrayal, but seemed to be dying anyway from a broken heart. She understood, in the way only those who had lost family could understand. Betrayal from a stranger was painful, but betrayal from blood was a wound that never fully healed. It was a Thursday evening, 5 days after the arrest, when she found him in the garden. He sat in his wheelchair beneath the fountain where Tunde and Ngozi had plotted his death, staring at nothing. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "You should come inside, sir," Zainab said softly, approaching with a blanket. The Lagos nights could be cool, and he'd been out here for hours. "It's getting late." "Leave me alone," he said, his voice flat and lifeless. "Please, Zainab, just leave me alone." She should have obeyed. Any other servant would have. But Zainab had never been good at walking away from people in pain. So instead, she sat down on the garden bench beside his wheelchair and wrapped the blanket around her own shoulders. If he wanted to be alone with his grief, he'd have to tolerate her company while doing it. This quiet moment changes everything. Keep watching. They sat in silence for a long time, the fountain's water providing a gentle soundtrack to their shared solitude. Finally, Mr. Kohler spoke, his voice so quiet she almost missed it. "I keep thinking about when we were children," he said, staring at the fountain. "Tunde and I, we were close once, before Father's expectations drove a wedge between us. He used to follow me everywhere, this little shadow always wanting to play, always wanting to be included." He paused, swallowing hard. When did that love turn to hate? When did my little brother become someone who could watch me die slowly and feel nothing but satisfaction? Zainab's heart ached for him. "Maybe it wasn't all hate," she offered gently. "Maybe part of him still loved you, and that made the resentment even worse. Love and hate aren't opposites, sir. They're neighbors, and sometimes people get lost between the two." Mr. Kohler turned to look at her, then really look at her, as if seeing her for the first time. How did someone so young become so wise? "Pain teaches wisdom faster than time," Zainab replied with a sad smile. "I lost my father when I was 15. Cancer. He refused treatment because he said we needed the money for food and school fees. I watched him waste away, choosing us over himself every single day. So I understand what it means to grieve someone who's still alive, and to carry guilt for things you couldn't control." Her words hung in the air between them, honest and raw. Mr. Kohler's expression softened, some of the hardness cracking. "I'm sorry," he said, "for your loss, and for being such a difficult bastard since you arrived." "You had reasons," Zainab said simply. Then, because the moment felt right and honest, she added something she'd been thinking for weeks. "But you're still here, Mr. Kohler. Still breathing. Still fighting. That means something. That means you get to decide what comes next. Not Tunde, not the poison, not the wheelchair. You." Something shifted in his eyes. A spark of the man he'd been before tragedy had stripped him down to survival mode. "What if I don't know how to move forward?" he asked, and the vulnerability in his voice was devastating. "What if I'm too broken?" Zainab reached out and took his hand, a gesture that would have been impossibly forward weeks ago but now felt natural as breathing. "Then we figure it out together," she said firmly. "One day at a time. One moment at a time. You're not alone in this, sir. Not anymore." He stared at their joined hands, dark against light, callous against smooth, and something in his expression transformed. It wasn't happiness. Not yet. But it was hope, fragile and new as a seedling pushing through concrete. "Kohler," he said suddenly. "What?" "My name. It's Kohler. Not sir, not Mr. Kohler. Just Kohler." He squeezed her hand gently. "If we're going to face the future together, you should at least call me by my name." Zainab's smile was bright enough to light the dark garden. "Okay, Kohler." They sat there until the stars came out, talking about everything and nothing. Her village, his dreams for the company, the future that had seemed impossible just days ago but now felt within reach. And somewhere in that conversation, something shifted between them. Something neither of them was quite ready to name, but both of them could feel growing like warmth spreading through cold bones. The following weeks brought unexpected changes to the mansion. With the poison no longer in his system and proper physical therapy resumed, Kohler began to regain some strength. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. The damage wasn't permanent. With time and dedication, he might even regain some mobility in his legs. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be quick, but it was possible. Zainab became more than his caregiver during this time. She became his partner in recovery, pushing him through exercises when he wanted to quit, celebrating small victories like standing for 5 seconds or moving his toes. She read to him from business reports when his eyes tired, offered opinions on company decisions that surprised him with their insight, and filled the mansion with a warmth that had been absent for years. Mrs. Adeyemi noticed a change and smiled knowingly. "That girl is good for him," she told the cook one afternoon. "She sees him, not his money or his disability, just him." The cook agreed, though she worried about what would happen when the inevitable occurred. Because everyone in the mansion could see it now, the way Cola's eyes followed Zainab when she moved through a room, the way her face brightened when he laughed, the careful way they avoided touching except when necessary, as if afraid that contact would ignite something neither was ready to face. The tension between them grew like a living thing, electric and undeniable. It finally broke on a rainy Sunday afternoon. Zainab was helping Kola with his exercises in the private gym he'd built after the accident. Thunder rumbled outside as she guided his leg through stretches, her hands gentle but firm. "You're getting stronger," she said, smiling up at him. "I can feel the resistance. Your muscles are remembering." "Thanks to you," Kola replied, and his voice was strange, thick with emotion that had nothing to do with physical therapy. Zainab looked up and found him staring at her with an intensity that stole her breath. The air between them seemed to crackle with electricity, charged and dangerous. "Kola," she whispered, not sure if it was a warning or a prayer. "I know I shouldn't," he said, his voice rough. "I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is impossible. You're my employee. I'm your boss. You're from a village. Don't." Zainab interrupted, her own emotions rising to meet his. "Don't list all the reasons why we can't. I've heard them in my own head every night for weeks." "Then you feel it too," he said, and it wasn't a question. She nodded, unable to speak past a lump in her throat. The truth was terrifying and liberating all at once. She had fallen in love with a man in the wheelchair, this broken billionaire who had trusted her with his life and his heart. And from the look in his eyes, he had fallen just as hard. "Zainab," he said her name like a revelation. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to love someone without my walls, without my defenses. You've seen me at my worst, bitter, angry, broken, and you stayed. Why did you stay?" The answer was simple and complicated all at once. "Because behind all that anger and pain, I saw someone worth saving," she replied, tears streaming down her face now. "I saw someone who'd been hurt and betrayed but still had the strength to fight. I saw you, Kola, the real you, and that's who I fell in love with." The confession hung between them for a heartbeat. Then Kola reached out and pulled her close, his arms strong despite everything he'd been through. And there, in a private gym with rain hammering against the windows and thunder shaking the foundation, they finally acknowledged what had been growing between them since the day she refused to leave after the first thrown glass. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "God help me, I love you." "I love you too," Zainab replied, her voice muffled against his chest. And for the first time in months, the mansion didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like home. Love has bloomed in the most unexpected place. But will society accept their relationship? Chapter 6 brings a final twist and the ending you've been waiting for. Subscribe now. Smash that like button and comment below whether you believe love can truly conquer all. Don't miss the epic conclusion. The whisper started almost immediately. Word spread through Lagos high society like wildfire. The billionaire Kola had fallen in love with his village maid. The scandal was delicious, irresistible, the kind of story that made tongues wag at country clubs and charity galas. Have you heard? Kola has lost his mind along with his legs. She must be after his money. What else could it be? A village girl? In that mansion? She probably used juju on him. The comments were cruel and predictable, but they hurt nonetheless. Zainab heard them when she went to the market, so the judgment in people's eyes when she accompanied Kola to business meetings. Even some of the mansion staff whispered, though Mrs. Adeyemi quickly silenced anyone who dared speak ill of Zainab in her presence. But the worst opposition came from where Kola least expected it, the company board of directors. They called an emergency meeting 6 weeks after Tunde's arrest, demanding Kohler's presence. He arrived in his wheelchair with Zainab by his side, and the temperature in the boardroom dropped 20 degrees the moment they entered. Chief Okafor was there too, having reclaimed his position as Kohler's business partner and advisor, his expression grim. "Gentlemen," Kohler said, positioning his wheelchair at the head of the table. "You called this meeting. Let's hear it." The board chairman, an older man named Alhaji Musa, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Kohler, we need to discuss your personal life and how it's affecting the company's reputation. This is where everything could fall apart. Stay tuned to see if love really conquers all." Kohler's expression turned to ice. "My personal life is none of the board's concern," he said flatly, "unless you're suggesting my relationship affects my ability to run this company." "That's exactly what we're suggesting." Another board member, Mr. Adisa, spoke up. He was younger, ambitious, and had always resented Kohler's control. "Our shareholders are concerned. The media is having a field day. A billionaire CEO in a relationship with his housemaid? It makes us look unstable, desperate. It affects stock prices and investor confidence." Zainab felt her face burn with shame, but Kohler reached over and took her hand, his grip strong and reassuring. "Let me be very clear," Kohler said, his voice dangerously quiet. "This woman saved my life. While my own brother was poisoning me, while my family circled like vultures waiting for me to die, she was the only one who cared enough to notice. She uncovered a murder plot, risked her own safety to protect me, and helped me rebuild myself from the broken man I'd become. So before you judge her or our relationship, remember that without Zainab, there would be no company to protect. I'd be dead, and Tunde would have run this business into the ground within a year." The boardroom fell silent. Chief Okafor leaned forward, adding his voice to Kohler's defense. "The company's stock has actually risen 12% since Tunde's arrest," he said, pulling up reports on his tablet. "Investors see Kohler as a survivor, someone who rooted out corruption in his own family. His relationship with Ms. Zainab is a human interest story that's garnered positive press in multiple international outlets. The only negative coverage is coming from local gossip columns that have no impact on our business fundamentals." Alhaji Musa shifted uncomfortably, but Mr. Adisa wasn't finished. "It's not just about the press," he insisted. "It's about propriety. What message does it send when our CEO dates an employee? It opens us up to lawsuits, accusations of workplace misconduct. Then Zainab is no longer an employee." Kohler interrupted, his voice ringing with authority. "As of this moment, she works for me personally, not the company. Her salary comes from my private funds, not corporate accounts. Problem solved." He looked around the table, daring anyone to challenge him further. "Are we done discussing my personal life, or would you like to also critique my choice of breakfast?" Several board members looked away, embarrassed. But Mr. Adisa stood his ground, playing his final card. "I'm calling for a vote of no confidence," he announced. "I move that Kohler step down as CEO until his personal situation stabilizes and he can focus fully on the company without distraction." The room erupted in murmurs. This was a coup attempt, plain and simple. Mr. Adisa had been waiting for an opportunity to seize power, and he thought Kohler's relationship provided the perfect excuse. Kohler didn't flinch. "By all means," he said calmly. "Let's vote. All in favor of removing me as CEO, raise your hands." Mr. Adisa's hand shot up immediately. 2 other board members, his allies, followed suit. 3 votes out of 12. The rest of the board sat with their hands firmly on the table, their loyalty to Kohler unshaken. They remembered who had built this company, who had turned a small transportation business into a billion-naira empire. A scandal wouldn't erase decades of success and leadership. Motion fails, Alhaji Musa announced, looking relieved. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled at Kohler. "For what it's worth, I think you and Miss Zainab are good for each other. My wife agrees. She said any woman who can tame your temper deserves a medal, not criticism." Laughter rippled through the boardroom, breaking the tension. Even Kola smiled, some of the hardness leaving his expression. Mr. Adisa stood abruptly, his face red with embarrassment and anger. "This is a mistake," he said. "You'll regret choosing personal feelings over professional standards." "Then I'll live with my regrets," Kola replied. "But I won't live without the woman I love. If you can't accept that, there's the door." Mr. Adisa stormed out, taking his 2 allies with him. Their resignations would be on Kola's desk by morning, but it was a small price to pay for peace. The remaining board members shifted the discussion to actual business, expansion plans, quarterly projections, new contracts. As they worked, Zainab sat quietly beside Kola, her presence no longer questioned or challenged. She belonged here, not because of her position, but because of who she was to the man at the head of the table. After the meeting, as they prepared to leave, Chief Okafor pulled Kola aside. "You took a risk today," he said quietly, "standing up for her like that. What if the vote had gone the other way?" Kola glanced at Zainab, who was gathering their papers and talking softly with Mrs. Adeyemi. "Then I would have walked away from the company," he replied simply. "I've already lost everything once. My legs, my family, nearly my life. But I found something worth more than all of it combined. I found someone who sees me, not my money or my empire. Someone who stayed when everyone else left. That's not something I'll ever gamble with again." 6 months later, the mansion garden was transformed into something magical. White flowers cascaded from every surface, fairy lights twinkled in the trees, and chairs were arranged in neat rows facing a simple altar. It was a small wedding by Billionaire standards, only close friends, loyal staff, and a handful of business associates who had proven their worth. No family attended on Kola's side. Tunde was serving a 15-year sentence for attempted murder, and the other relatives had been cut off completely. But Zainab's family filled 3 entire rows. Her mother, healthy now thanks to the treatments Kola had paid for, her siblings dressed in their finest clothes, her aunts and uncles who had traveled from the village to witness this impossible fairy tale made real. As Zainab walked down the makeshift aisle in a simple but elegant white dress, Kola's breath caught in his throat. He actually stood, with the help of specially designed braces and leg supports, the result of months of grueling physical therapy. He would never run again, would always need assistance, but he could stand for his bride. That was enough. The ceremony was brief and beautiful. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Kola kissed Zainab with a tenderness that made even hardened businessmen wipe their eyes. This was more than a wedding. It was a testimony to survival, to second chances, to love that bloomed in the darkest soil. At the reception, Kola gave a speech that would be quoted in newspapers for weeks. "Everyone warned me about falling in love with a poor village maid," he said, his arm around Zainab's waist. "They said she was after my money, that the scandal would destroy me, that I was making the biggest mistake of my life. But here's what they didn't understand. Zainab didn't save me because of what I had. She saved me despite it. She looked at a bitter, broken man in a wheelchair and saw someone worth fighting for. That's not opportunism. That's love. Real, pure, unconditional love. And if choosing that love makes me a fool, then I'll be a fool happily for the rest of my life." The crowd erupted in applause, and somewhere in the back, Chief Okafor raised his glass with a knowing smile. As the celebration continued into the night, Zainab and Kola slipped away to the same garden spot where Tunde had once plotted death. Now it held only life and promise. "Are you happy?" Kola asked, holding his wife close. Zainab looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "I came to this mansion expecting hard labor and difficulty," she said. "I found my home instead. Found you. So yes, I'm happy. Are you?" Kola thought about the journey, the poison, the betrayal, the long months of recovery and transformation. He thought about the man he'd been, drowning in bitterness, and the man he'd become, saved by a village girl who refused to give up on him. "I'm more than happy," he replied, kissing her forehead. "I'm alive. Finally, truly alive." And in that moment, under the Lagos stars with his wife in his arms, Kola understood a truth that money had never taught him. The greatest wealth wasn't measured in naira or property or corporate empires. It was measured in the love of someone who stayed when staying was hard, who fought when fighting seemed impossible, who saw value where others saw only weakness. Zainab had given him that, and in return, he would spend every day of his life making sure she never regretted walking into his mansion that first morning and refusing to leave, even when glasses shattered and hearts broke and the world said it was impossible. Because sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most broken people. And sometimes a poor maid from a village and a bitter billionaire in a wheelchair can find a happy ending after all. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. It helps us bring you more emotional stories like this one. Drop a comment sharing your favorite moment from Zainab and Kola's love story. Which chapter moved you the most? And if you believe in second chances and true love, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. God bless you all. And remember, real love doesn't walk away when things are broken. See you in the next story.